What's up, everyone? Today I'm going to be doing a ranking of all 13 of Christopher Nolan's films from worst to best. Starting off at number 13, I have Following. It's one of Nolan's earlier movies, coming in at like a 70-minute runtime and a budget of around like $6,000. It's kind of hard to like really judge this movie because it technically counts as a feature film, but he's clearly still learning the ropes and working with a limited space. One of the things I really admire about Nolan like so much is his ability to push cinema to its fullest potential. So when you watch one of his movies, it feels as if like not a single ounce of potential is wasted. So I guess it is like kind of interesting to come back and watch this where he was kind of just on his own and working with what he had. It still has a signature style and voice and a lot of elements that come up in his later works, and it's clearly a first draft of something that would be really special. So for now, it's going at number 13. Number 12, I have Insomnia. I'm going to be honest, this is one of Nolan's least talked about films, and I honestly don't really have much to say here because I watched this a few years ago and I don't really have as good of a memory of it compared to the others. I remember Robin Williams gave an amazing performance and he bounces very well off Al Pacino. And I still think this is kind of like a weak follow-up to Memento, but I do think there are stronger films out there which try to cover the same ground. Some examples I would give would be like Fincher's Zodiac and Villeneuve's Prisoners. Number 11, we have The Dark Knight Rises, the controversial end to one of the most iconic trilogies of the century. Bane steals basically every scene he's in, even though the sound mixing on his voice muffles his performance a little bit. I do like some of Bruce's growth in this movie, especially his recovery after his back in the pit, but I do think that Talia al Ghul was not very well written, and her death was very laughably bad. The subplot with the police kind of drags on a bit when they're in the sewers and leads to a lackluster Robin reveal in the last second. The Harvey Dent act, which is the driving force of what most of this movie is based on, is kind of built on somewhat faulty logic, and a lot of the action set pieces of this movie are terrible and a lot of other problems. I think credit where credit is due, they were trying to make the best out of what they could without Heath Ledger, and also trying to follow up one of the biggest and most iconic blockbusters ever, but I do think that it still falls flat. Number 10, I have Dunkirk. Well, also one of the more forgotten Nolan movies, which is a shame because I think it has some amazing cinematography and sound design out of all his movies. Blade Runner 2049, I think, came out the same year as well, so that kind of overshadowed it a bit. And 1917 came out 2 years later, so that also kind of overshadowed it a bit. But regardless, Mark Rylance, Tom Hardy, and Cillian Murphy are very fantastic in this. Overall, a very good movie. I just think it gets overshadowed by some of the other movies at the time. Number 9, I have Tenet. This one's a controversial one, but it kind of has a soft spot in my heart, mainly because it was one of the only movies I remember in theaters when the COVID-19 pandemic was at its height, so it was basically the only movie you could see. I think I saw it like 5 times when it came out over the course of a few months. I think the main character is a little bit weak, but the supporting characters like Robert Pattinson's Neo and Elizabeth Debicki's Cat kind of make up for it. I see this kind of like if Nolan made a James Bond movie, which is something he's been wanting to do for a little bit, and I think viewing it from that perspective definitely helps. I think it tries too hard to recapture the magic of his earlier movies like Inception, which kind of falls flat, but I don't think it's trying to be overly smart or complicated like how some people have said on the internet. One of the characters in this movie, I think, literally tells the main character that the audience that you shouldn't really overthink this from the very beginning. Like, don't try to understand it, you have to feel it. And I think this movie does have some interesting ideas, some good action sequences, and a great score by Ludwig Göransson, which is the first of many partnerships in the future. Next up, I have Batman Begins. I think it's a realistic, grounded take on Batman, which was a strong idea, especially after Batman and Robin. This movie really helped shape the genre and is a solid adaptation of the Batman mythos. My main complaint is that their commitment to the being hyper-realistic holds the movie back in some areas and leads to some tonal inconsistencies. Like, for example, the League of Shadows is basically saying that we want to destroy Gotham because it's become too corrupt, and then they'll cut back to Gotham and it'll be mostly regular Chicago with like 1 or 2 like organized crime gangs and maybe a mugging every now and then. It feels more like show don't tell, and I think that's something that the later entries like the Batman do a much better job of world building. Also, this is a minor nitpick, but they mispronounce a lot of the names in this movie. Like, Ra's al Ghul is supposed to be pronounced Ra's al Ghul, and Falcone is pronounced like Falcone in this. I don't really know why that was. Number 7, I have Memento. This is the movie that really put Nolan on the map. It breaks all the rules of traditional storytelling and slowly drip feeds you the story bit by bit as the narrative goes backwards. It's an incredibly bold concept for such a young director at the time, and it was executed perfectly. I really don't think any other director, even working today, could ever manage this. It also has a very interesting perspective on grief and trauma and how people cope and move forward with their lives after a horrific incident, which I think is very interesting. I think the reason why it's so low on this list is because it wasn't really a film I grew up with or one that I watched in theaters, so I kind of lack that personal connection with it. And I think once you've seen his later movies and then come back to this, it doesn't seem as impressive, which I think is an unfair interpretation, but this is as far up as I could put it. Number 6, I have The Prestige. A lot of people who criticize Nolan's films for being devoid of life or too serious need to give this film a shot because it's honestly one of the most fun, I think, no one has had with the film yet. The plot is pretty simple. It's 2 magicians trying to outdo one another, and it shows the dark and disturbing lengths that they're willing to go to not only achieve personal success, but also rid the other of it. It's such a fun idea, and it's generally very surprising. It's the only time Nolan and Hugh Jackman have collaborated. Christian Bale is also very good in this. Him and Nolan have had a great working relationship since the Batman films, so it's nice to see that extension a little bit here. Number 5, I have Interstellar. This is personally one of my favorites, and it's a true achievement of filmmaking, and one of the most iconic science fiction movies ever made. I think Matthew McConaughey, Jessica Chastain, and Matt Damon too are phenomenal in this. I think the visual effects and the incorporation of actual concepts of physics like relativity was very well done, and the score is one of the best and most iconic in cinematic history. The reason I don't have it as far up in my top 4 is because I do think if you overanalyze this movie to a similar scrutiny as others of Nolan's works, it kind of falls apart a bit. I think it's one of his more emotional films, which I really enjoy, but I think the logical side kind of falls off a bit, so I think you need to find a balance there. Number 4, his most recent film is The Odyssey. His most recent entry in the answer to his blank check that he received for Oppenheimer. I might have a bit of recency bias in this, and I can honestly see this being interchangeable with Interstellar in the future. Maybe I'll put Interstellar above later, but I thought this movie was fantastic. Again, it feels like no potential is wasted here whatsoever in the movie. Every aspect was pursued to the fullest. Some stellar performances from Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, Elliot Page as well. I also really like Tom Holland. I think he carries a lot of strong but subtle charisma and charm that you can tell he's really grown as an actor. Not to say he was ever bad to begin with. That line when he tells Antinius, like, my mother wishes for all of you to burn, is very strong. That honestly gave me chills. I love the presentation of the Greek mythology as well in this movie. One thing I really liked was the twist with Athena. I'm not going to spoil it too much, but it really recontextualizes the story and like adds a lot more depth to Odysseus' journey. Again, this is just one of those movies where I think that it is a reinterpretation of the original epic 3,000 years ago, and I think like a lot of the stuff is reinterpreted in different contexts, which I think is important. I'll keep my thoughts brief from this, honestly, because I do have recency bias, but I think it was a phenomenal film. And then at number 3, we have Oppenheimer. It's one of the best screenplays I think I've ever seen be put to screen in a long time. The two conflicting narratives of Oppenheimer's story from his own point of view and the point of view of what others see him as was a very interesting choice, and seeing the tension build up there between the two over the course of the movie really had me on the edge of my seat. Cillian Murphy really gives an all-timer in this performance here. I think second best Nolan performance, because we all know who the first is, obviously. Yeah, honestly, no one could have like played this very straight and done like a very typical biopic, and I think people would have been fine with it. But he makes so many narrative choices that really fit in with his style and vision that I think really elevate this to a new level. On a similar level, I would put like The Social Network or Raging Bull. It's honestly an amazing movie, and I'm really glad it got the Oscar sweep. Number 2, we have The Dark Knight. Obviously, no surprise here. This is one of the most iconic movies in film history, maybe behind like just the original Star Wars. Let's get out of the way. Heath Ledger is just unrecognizable in this performance. When you look at his face, you just don't see a natural human being there. You only see the character he's playing. I think the only 2 other actors I've seen being able to pull that off equally as good are maybe Anthony Hopkins and Daniel Day-Lewis. The philosophy and ideas that this film talks about in regards to society is something on a completely other level, and human morals as well. And it's so far beyond what like other superhero movies are doing at the time. It's really brilliant. And again, what they do with Harvey Dent and his fall from Gotham's White Knight to Two-Face is just so brilliant. There's just nothing else to say about this movie that hasn't already been said. And number 1, we have Inception. Across his years, this has always been consistently one of my top 4 favorite movies of all time. It took Nolan, I think, around 10... And number 1, we have Inception. Across his years, this has always been consistently one of my top 4 favorite movies of all time. It took Nolan, I think, around 10 years. And number 1, we have Inception. Across the years, this has always been consistently in my top 4 favorite movies of all time. It took Nolan around 10 years, which is an entire decade, just to write the script and bring it to the screen, and I really shows in the final product. This movie is so intricately crafted and detailed to the point where I'm rewatching it for the 20th time and still picking up on the details I have yet to notice. So it makes this film like timeless, but also it lingers in your mind for like years after you've seen it for the first time. And it tells like multiple different stories simultaneously in different layers without creating any major plot holes. And above all else, it has a solid emotional core and strengthened by the characters you've come to care about by the end of the movie. It balances the logic and emotion I was talking about earlier. It's truly a masterpiece, and it has to be one of the best cliffhangers in film history. And for that reason, it's going at number 1 in this ranking.